The poor little girl didn't know the freezing boy she sheltered was the billionaire's lost son, missing for 4 days. The next morning when his father found him, he claimed her as his daughter. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. I want to tell you about a little girl named Emma. She was 7 years old, with matted blonde hair and shoes held together by hope and desperation. Emma lived in a ramshackle trailer on the outskirts of Nashville, Tennessee, the kind of place where the wind whistles through cracks in the walls and the heating barely works when you need it most. The trailer was old, probably built in the 1970s, and it showed every single year of its age. The walls were thin, barely insulating against the brutal winter cold. The roof had patches where the original shingles had long since deteriorated. Emma's mother had left her with her grandmother 3 years ago, promising to come back when things got better. She said it was temporary. She said she was going to find work in Memphis, save some money, and then come back to get Emma. Emma's grandmother had believed her. Emma had believed her too at first, but things never got better. Her mother never called, never sent a postcard, never sent money. She simply vanished like she'd been erased from the world. Her grandmother had raised Emma the best she could on a tiny Social Security check. They had learned to stretch every dollar, to make miracles out of nothing. Emma's grandmother had taught her how to make a meal out of rice, beans, and whatever vegetables were on sale at the dollar store. They had spent long winter nights playing card games by candlelight to save on electricity. Her grandmother had sung to her, told her stories, and promised her that life would get better someday. But life didn't get better. It got worse. Emma's grandmother passed away on a cold February morning 3 years ago, right before Emma turned 7. She had gone to bed with a cough and never woke up. Emma had found her that morning, already cold. Emma didn't understand what had happened at first. She thought her grandmother was sleeping. She had sat beside her for hours, waiting for her to wake up, before she finally understood that something was fundamentally wrong. After that, everything changed. The state didn't know about Emma. There was no one to report her to the authorities. The neighbors knew vaguely that an old woman lived there, but after her grandmother's funeral, a small, sad affair paid for by charity, they assumed the trailer was empty. Emma was clever, smarter than other children her age. She knew how to stay hidden, how to be invisible. She locked the trailer door. She told her teacher that her grandmother was sick and couldn't come to school events. When the school tried to call, Emma answered the phone and pretended to be her grandmother's caregiver. Every day, Emma would wake up in that freezing trailer and get ready for school. School was her sanctuary. It was warm. It was safe. She'd sit in the classroom, soaking up the heat like it was a luxury item, wrapping herself in the warmth like it was a blanket. She'd eat the free lunch slowly, deliberately, savoring every single bite, because she didn't know when her next meal would come. The school lunch was often the only real meal she ate all day. She had become a master at rationing. A package of crackers from the dollar store could last 3 days if she was disciplined enough. A can of beans, 5 days if she ate very carefully. She had learned to make a single apple last, to savor the taste, to eat it slowly, to make the sensation of fullness last as long as possible. But it was December now, the coldest December Tennessee had seen in 20 years. Weather reports warned of dangerous wind chills. The nights were brutal, dropping to single digits and below. Families huddled together in their warm homes. Emma's little space heater, a battered old thing her grandmother had left behind, had stopped working weeks ago. She had tried to fix it, had watched YouTube videos on her school-issued laptop about how to repair appliances, but it was beyond saving. The heating system in the trailer was broken beyond repair. She wrapped herself in every blanket she could find, every piece of fabric in the trailer. She wore 3 layers of clothes to bed. She shivered through the night, wondering if morning would come, wondering if her body would stay warm enough to survive until dawn. On this particular evening, December 23rd, as snow began to fall, unusual for Nashville, which rarely got snow, Emma was huddled under 3 blankets, wearing a winter coat inside the trailer, when she heard something. A small sound, almost like crying, but so faint she thought she was imagining it. The wind was howling outside, and she wondered if the sound was just the wind playing tricks on her ears. But something inside her made her listen more carefully. She got up, her bare feet touching the icy floor of the trailer, and went to the window. Her feet were numb. She couldn't feel them anymore. Through the frosted glass, she could barely make out a shape. A small figure, stumbling through the snow about 30 feet from her trailer. Another child. Emma's heart stopped completely. She had lived in this trailer for 3 years now, and she had never seen another child in this area, especially not in winter. Who would have a child out here? In this cold, in the dark, without a jacket, without proper shoes? She opened the creaking door, and the wind hit her like a physical force, stealing her breath. The cold was beyond anything she had experienced. It was the kind of cold that burns, that makes your lungs hurt when you breathe. About 20 feet away, partially buried in snow, was a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. He was wearing expensive clothes, designer jeans, a silk shirt that was torn and dirty, a cashmere sweater that must have cost more money than Emma's family had ever seen. But they were soaked through with snow and melting water. His lips were blue, almost purple. His tiny fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles looked white, like he was holding on to something invisible. His eyes were unfocused, glazed over. This child was dying. "Hello?" Emma called out, her own teeth chattering so hard she could barely form words. The boy looked up at her with eyes that held an unspeakable sadness and confusion. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed into the snow. His small body went completely limp. Emma didn't think. 7-year-old children aren't supposed to make life or death decisions. They aren't supposed to know what to do when they find a dying child in the snow. But Emma had survived on her own for 3 years. Emma had learned what survival meant. She ran out into the freezing night, barefoot, wearing only a thin coat, and dragged the boy inside her trailer with strength she didn't know she possessed. She locked the door behind them and immediately wrapped him in every single blanket she had. Every piece of fabric in her home became a tool for keeping this child alive. The boy was unconscious, shivering violently, his whole body convulsing with the cold. Emma had no phone. She had no way to call for help. There was no internet connection in the trailer. All she had was her 7-year-old instinct to survive, the same instinct that had kept her alive these past 3 years on her own. That same instinct that had taught her how to cook basic meals, how to budget money, how to stay hidden from a system that would have put her in the foster care system. She made a decision that would change both their lives forever, a decision that would echo through eternity. She undressed the boy carefully, removing his wet, expensive clothes. His body was dangerously cold. She had learned from watching videos online about hypothermia that wet clothes were dangerous. She wrapped him in her warmest blankets, the ones she had been saving for the coldest nights, and held him close, sharing her own body heat. She had learned long ago that human warmth was the most powerful medicine in the world. She lay with him through the entire night, whispering to him, even though he couldn't hear her, even though he was unconscious. "You're safe now," she whispered over and over again. "I don't know where you came from, but you're safe with me. I promise you. I won't let anything happen to you. You're going to be okay. You're going to survive this. I won't let you die, I promise." She held the boy against her chest, feeling his heartbeat slowly become less frantic. She felt his body temperature gradually rise as her own warmth transferred to him. Hours passed. The night seemed endless. At some point she realized she was crying, tears streaming down her face as she held this stranger's child in her arms. She had spent 3 years alone, telling herself she didn't need anyone, that she was strong enough to survive by herself. But holding this child, she understood something fundamental about human connection. This child needed her, and somehow she needed him too. As the night wore on, the boy's shivering gradually subsided. His breathing became more regular. His body stopped convulsing. By morning, as the sun started to rise and cast a pale light through the trailer windows, his eyes fluttered open. He was alive. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice hoarse and weak, barely a whisper. "You're safe," Emma said simply. "I found you in the snow last night. What's your name?" The boy looked at her for a long moment, trying to focus his eyes, trying to understand where he was and who this girl was. "My name is Lucas. I don't know where my daddy is. I don't know how I got here. Everything is confused." Emma brought him water from the tap, though it came out cold. She opened her last can of soup, tomato soup, her favorite, and heated it on her small stove. She shared it with him spoon by spoon, making sure he didn't eat too quickly, making sure his stomach could handle the warmth and nutrition. She didn't ask questions. She simply gave him what he needed. She had learned that sometimes the most important thing you could do for someone was to provide them with the basic necessities of survival without judgment or interrogation. As Lucas ate, slowly, his eyes becoming more focused, he began to remember fragments of what had happened. His memories were jumbled, traumatic, disconnected. "There was a man," he said, his small voice shaking. "A bad man. He took me from my room. He said he was taking me away. He said my daddy deserved to suffer. He said he was going to make my daddy sorry for what he'd done. We were in a car, a dark car. I was so scared. Then we stopped at a house. It was dark. He left me alone for a moment. I could see the door. I just ran as fast as I could. I ran out into the night. I ran through the woods. And then I don't remember anything else until I woke up here with you." Emma's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a lost child. This wasn't an accident. This was something bigger. This was danger. This was a crime. But when she looked at Lucas's terrified face, his small body wrapped in her blankets, his eyes full of fear and confusion, she knew she couldn't turn him in. Not yet. Not until she knew he was truly safe. Not until she understood what was happening. "Rest now," she said, brushing his blonde hair back from his forehead with a tenderness she didn't know she possessed. "Rest. I'll keep you safe. That's a promise. Nobody is going to hurt you while you're here with me. I promise you that." Lucas fell asleep, his head against her chest, and Emma sat there for hours, holding him, wondering what she had gotten herself into, and knowing with absolute certainty that she would protect this child with her life. She would fight for him. She would die for him if necessary. She had spent 3 years learning how to survive alone. Now she understood why survival mattered. It mattered because there were people in the world who needed your help. But what she didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that this little boy was worth millions. That somewhere in Nashville, a man was losing his mind with grief and desperation. A powerful man, a desperate man. A man who would move heaven and earth to find his son. A man who would give everything he had to get his child back. A man who was about to find something else entirely, something that would change him forever. 4 days earlier, Marcus Webb had everything a man could want. At 29 years old, he was a self-made billionaire. His tech company, Webb Technologies, had revolutionized the way people worked. The software his company created was used by millions of people around the world. He had penthouses in New York, Los Angeles, and Nashville. He had a yacht. He had awards lining his walls. He had been featured on the cover of Forbes magazine. He had been invited to speak at Harvard Business School. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, but what he treasured most in the entire world was sleeping in a room down the hall from his master suite, his son, Lucas. his 5-year-old son, his entire universe. Lucas's mother had been a beautiful actress named Catherine. Marcus had loved her desperately when they were together. He had written her poems. He had planned to spend his life with her. But Catherine had chosen her career over their family. She had been offered a role in a major motion picture, a role that would require her to be on location for months. She had chosen the role. When Lucas was born, Catherine had signed away her parental rights. She had wanted to be free of her responsibilities as a mother. Marcus had fought for full custody. He had won, and he had been a single father ever since. He didn't mind, not for a single moment. Lucas was his entire universe. Lucas was the reason he worked as hard as he did. Lucas was the person he most wanted to make proud. On the morning Lucas disappeared, Marcus had been in his downtown office when he received a call from the nanny. Her name was Patricia, and she had been with them for 2 years. She was professional, reliable, trustworthy. Her voice was shaking. "Mr. Webb, Lucas isn't in his room. I can't find him anywhere. The door to his room is locked from the inside, but he's not here. I don't understand. I checked on him at 8 p.m. last night and he was asleep. I locked the door, like always, to make sure he couldn't wander. This morning I opened the door and his bed is empty. His window is open. Mr. Webb, I think someone took him." Marcus had thought she was joking. Then he realized she wasn't. His blood ran cold. He couldn't breathe. He felt like his heart had stopped beating. The police were called immediately. The FBI was called within the hour. Within hours, the story was international news. Helicopters circled his mansion. News vans lined the streets outside his property. The headline screamed, "Billionaire's 5-year-old son missing from locked Nashville mansion." A ransom note came that afternoon, delivered by courier to his office. It read, "You ruined my life. You destroyed everything I had. I'm going to ruin yours. Your son is gone. You'll never see him again. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what happened to him. You'll spend every night wondering if he's alive or dead. You'll spend every day in agony, the way I have." It was signed by a man named Derek Thompson, a former employee Marcus had fired 3 years ago for embezzlement. Derek had stolen $500,000 from the company. Marcus had pressed charges. Derek had gone to prison. Marcus had heard he'd been released recently, but he hadn't thought about him. Derek Thompson had been a small part of his past, someone he'd tried to forget. Now, Derek Thompson had his son. Marcus had gone insane. He'd offered a $50 million reward for information leading to Lucas's safe return. He'd hired the most expensive private investigators in the country. He'd spent every moment searching, praying, bargaining with a God he'd never believed in before. He'd made promises to God. He'd promised to change his life, to give away his fortune, to become a better man, if only God would bring his son back safely. The days had stretched into what felt like an eternity. Each day without Lucas was a day of pure agony. Marcus couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He lost 15 pounds in 4 days. His staff was worried about him. His sister called repeatedly, begging him to take care of himself. But he couldn't. How could he sleep while his son was missing? How could he eat while his son might be starving? How could he do anything except search for his son? On the morning of the 5th day, as Marcus sat in his office staring at a photo of Lucas's face, Lucas smiling, Lucas laughing, Lucas alive and safe, and here, his security chief called him with a tip. "Sir, we have a lead. Someone matching Lucas's description was spotted near the abandoned neighborhood outside the city. A homeless woman said she saw a child in a trailer. She said the child looked scared. She said there was a young girl with him, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She said she heard the girl singing to the child, trying to keep him calm." Marcus didn't hesitate. He got in his car and drove like a man possessed, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode out of his chest. He broke speed limits. He ran red lights. He drove as if his life depended on it. as if his son's life depended on it. Because it did. The neighborhood was worse than he'd imagined. Ramshackle trailers, boarded-up houses, snow blowing across empty streets, poverty and desperation visible in every detail. His security team had radioed ahead. They knew where to look. The homeless woman had given them directions. Marcus pulled up in front of a trailer that looked like it might collapse if someone sneezed too hard. He could see a small light in the window, smoke coming from a vent. Someone was inside. He was out of the car before it stopped. He didn't knock. He couldn't wait to knock. Knocking required patience. Patience was a luxury he didn't have. He pushed on the door, and it swung open. And there, on a makeshift bed in a corner, was his son. Lucas was awake. He was pale, thin, but alive. More than alive, he was warm. He was being held by a small, blonde-haired girl. The girl looked up at Marcus with enormous eyes, terrified and defiant at the same time, as if she was ready to protect this child with her own body if necessary. "Daddy!" Lucas screamed, and he scrambled toward Marcus with the kind of desperation that only a missing child can have. Marcus fell to his knees, and Lucas crashed into his arms. Marcus held his son like he was made of spun glass, like he might disappear if he let go. He held him like his life depended on it. "Baby, baby, I'm here, you're safe. You're safe," Marcus was sobbing, saying the same words over and over, his whole body shaking with emotion. Lucas was crying too. "Daddy, I was so scared, I was so cold, and then Emma found me. Emma saved me. She kept me warm. She gave me food. She promised me I was safe." Marcus looked up at the girl, and for the first time he really saw her. She was tiny, impossibly tiny. Her clothes were threadbare. Her hair was matted and dirty. There was a wisdom in her eyes that no 7-year-old should have. There was a strength in her small frame that seemed impossible. "You," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "How did you? What did you do?" Emma spoke quietly, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. "I found him in the snow last night. He was going to die, so I brought him inside." Marcus stood up, still holding Lucas, and he looked at the trailer, really looked at it, at the poverty, at the desperate attempts to keep warm, at the absence of any parent or guardian, at the evidence that a child had been living here alone. Cans of food, a school backpack, a stack of school books. "Where are your parents?" he asked. Emma's face closed off. "Not here." "Where?" "They're not here," she said firmly, her small chin lifting defiantly. "Lucas was alone. I helped him. That's all that matters." Marcus looked at his son. Lucas was gazing at Emma with gratitude and affection that broke Marcus's heart into 1,000 pieces. This child, this tiny, brave child, with the matted hair and the worn clothes, had saved his son's life. She had taken him in. She had warmed him. She had kept him safe. She had done more for his son in one night than he had done in years. His eyes filled with tears again. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Emma." "Emma," Marcus repeated. He looked at her small, cold hands. He looked at her too thin face. He looked at her scared eyes. And something shifted inside him. Something fundamental changed in his understanding of what mattered in life. "Emma, do you have anyone taking care of you?" Emma's silence was answer enough. Marcus made a decision in that moment that would reshape both their worlds forever. He knelt down, still holding Lucas, and he looked directly into Emma's eyes. "Emma, you saved my son's life. You gave him warmth when you had so little yourself. You showed him kindness when you could have turned him away. You showed him mercy when you had every reason to turn him out. I can never repay you for that, but I'm going to try." He paused, his voice trembling with emotion. "How would you like to come home with us? How would you like to have a family?" The legal process was surprisingly quick when you had Marcus Webb's resources and determination. Emma didn't understand all the paperwork, all the court dates, all the lawyers and their complicated language. What she understood was that she was no longer going to sleep in a freezing trailer. What she understood was that someone wanted her. Someone had chosen her. Someone was willing to fight for her. Marcus had a lawyer find Emma's remaining relatives, an aunt who had abandoned her years ago, who had refused to take her in when her grandmother died. For a substantial settlement, $250,000, the aunt signed away any claims to Emma. The aunt had never loved her. The aunt had never wanted her. The money meant more to her than her own blood. Within a week, Emma was sleeping in a bedroom that was bigger than the entire trailer she'd lived in. The room had a four-poster bed with Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like sleeping on clouds. It had a walk-in closet already filled with new clothes in her size, picked out by a professional stylist. It had a window that looked out over Nashville's skyline with a view of the city lights at night. It had its own bathroom with hot water that never ran out. But Emma would spend the first 3 nights sleeping on the floor. Marcus found her there on the 3rd night, curled up beside the bed like a frightened animal, wrapped in the thick carpet, shivering with fear even though the room was warm. "Emma, honey, why are you sleeping on the floor?" he asked gently, sitting down beside her. "Because I'm scared," Emma whispered. "This doesn't feel real. When I wake up, I'll be back in the trailer. This is a dream. Tomorrow morning, the alarm will go off, and I'll be cold again, and Lucas will be gone, and I'll be alone." Marcus sat down next to her. "I promise you, you won't be. This is real. You're safe. You're home now. That's a promise I'm making to you. A promise I will never break. I will never ask you to leave. I will never send you away. This is your home now. Forever." Emma slowly got into the bed. It took her weeks to truly believe she belonged there. For the first few weeks, she would wake up gasping, convinced she was back in the trailer. Marcus would come to her room and hold her, whispering reassurances until she fell back asleep. Lucas, on the other hand, had immediately bonded with her like they were siblings. He followed her everywhere. He showed her his toys, his books, his room. He held her hand when she was scared. He slept better knowing she was in the house. The trauma of his kidnapping seemed to fade when he was near her. "Don't be scared," Lucas would tell her, with the innocence of a 5-year-old. "Daddy takes care of us now. You're my sister. You're my family now. Nobody can hurt us anymore." Marcus hired tutors. He brought in doctors to give Emma a complete physical. She was malnourished, anemic, and suffered from mild frostbite on her fingers and toes. One doctor told Marcus that if she had spent one more night in that cold, she might not have survived. Her organs were shutting down. She was dying. Marcus didn't think it was luck that he found his son. He thought it was grace. He thought it was a miracle. Over the following weeks, Emma began to blossom. Her hair, once matted and dull, became shiny and bright as golden wheat. Her cheeks, once hollow and sunken, filled out. The fear in her eyes began to transform into curiosity, and then into joy. She had never owned more than 3 dresses in her life. Now she had a closet full of clothes. She had never had her own bathroom. Now she had a shower that was hers alone. She had never eaten fresh fruit regularly. Now there were bowls of fruit on every counter. But she was still haunted by nightmares. She would wake up screaming that the cold was coming back, that she was freezing, that she was alone again. She would hide food under her pillow, terrified it would disappear. She would ask Marcus over and over again, "You're not going to send me back, right? You're not going to leave me? You're not going to change your mind?" And Marcus would hold her and say, "Never, not ever. You are my daughter now, Emma, do you understand? Not just legally, not just because the papers say so. You are my daughter in my heart. You will always be my daughter. This is permanent. This is forever. Nothing you could ever do would make me send you away. One day, as Emma was looking at herself in the mirror of her new bathroom, seeing her own reflection clearly for perhaps the first time, really looking at herself, at the girl who had survived alone, at the girl who had saved a stranger, she asked Marcus a question that would change everything. "Mr. Webb." "Emma," Marcus interrupted gently. "Don't you think it's time you called me Dad?" Emma's eyes widened. She looked down at her hands. Is that allowed? Is that okay? Am I allowed to call you that? Aren't dads supposed to be, I don't know, biological? Aren't they supposed to be people who were there from the beginning?" "It's more than okay," Marcus said. "It's what I want more than anything in the world. It's what I've been hoping you would say. You saved my life, Emma. You saved my son's life. You are my daughter in every way that matters. You are my daughter because I choose you. You are my daughter because I love you. I want you to call me Dad." Emma looked back at him in the mirror. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, Dad." Later that week, Marcus made it official. He hired the best family law lawyer in Tennessee. The adoption papers were processed quickly. Emma Webb was no longer a foster child. She was no longer a child in the system. She was legally, irrevocably, permanently his daughter. The state recognized it. The law recognized it. Most importantly, her heart recognized it. The judge who finalized the adoption had tears in his eyes when he signed the papers. He had been a judge for 30 years. He had presided over countless custody battles, divorce proceedings, and family disputes. But this case was different. This case was about love transcending circumstance. This case was about a man choosing to save a child who wasn't biologically his. This case was about the power of human kindness. "I'm honored to finalize this adoption," the judge said. "This is one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed. Emma, you are officially Marcus Webb's daughter. Marcus, you are officially Emma's father. May you both find joy, peace, and love in this new family you're creating together." The local news picked up the story. Billionaire tech CEO adopts daughter who saved his son's life. The story went viral on social media within hours. Hashtags trended. News outlets around the world covered it. People were moved by it. It was a fairy tale in a world that desperately needed fairy tales. People wrote poems about it. People made videos about it. Celebrities shared the story with their millions of followers. Musicians wrote songs about Emma's courage. Artists created paintings depicting the moment Emma found Lucas in the snow. It became a symbol of hope and redemption, a reminder that one person could change the course of history. Emma received thousands of letters from people around the world. They shared their own stories of hardship and survival. They talked about how Emma's story had inspired them to be braver, kinder, more compassionate. They talked about how her example had motivated them to help others, to see the value in every human life. A woman in Japan wrote about how Emma's story had inspired her to adopt a child from the foster care system. A man in Brazil wrote about how he had started a charity for homeless children after reading about Emma. The ripples of that one act of kindness spread across the globe, touching lives in ways that Emma could never have imagined. But what nobody knew, what Emma herself was only beginning to understand, was that this was just the beginning. That she had been given a second chance at life, and that chance came with opportunities she'd never dreamed of. That her destiny was just starting to unfold. Marcus enrolled her in the most exclusive private school in Nashville. Within months, her teachers were amazed. Emma was extraordinary. She had an intellect that seemed to operate on a different level than other children. She could solve complex math problems that 8th graders struggled with. She had a photographic memory. She understood science concepts that typically weren't taught until high school. She read voraciously, consuming books on physics, mathematics, and philosophy. "Your daughter is exceptional," her headmaster told Marcus during a conference. "In my 30 years of education, I've only seen a handful of minds like hers. She's not just intelligent, Mr. Webb. She's a genius, a genuine prodigy. I would recommend advanced placement in every subject. I would recommend tutoring from the most advanced educators we can find. She has the potential to do things that very few humans can do." Marcus wasn't surprised. He'd always sensed something special about her. When she'd found Lucas in the snow, it hadn't been luck. It had been instinct. It had been kindness. It had been the product of a mind that understood complexity and human nature better than most adults. As the months turned into a year, Emma transformed from a traumatized street child into a confident young girl. She had a father who loved her. She had a brother who adored her. She had security, warmth, opportunity, and education. She had everything she'd never had before, but she never forgot where she came from. Sometimes, on cold nights, she would think about the trailer. She would think about the nights she'd shivered alone. And she would hold Lucas a little tighter, grateful that fate had brought them together. She would look at her own reflection and barely recognize the girl who stared back, a girl with shiny hair, bright eyes, and a future full of possibility. She didn't know that fate wasn't finished with her story yet. She didn't know that the greatest surprises were still to come. It was Marcus's sister, Victoria, who first noticed something odd about Emma. Victoria was a clinical psychologist with offices in Manhattan. She had a PhD from Harvard. She had published numerous papers on trauma and resilience. She'd come down to Nashville to spend Thanksgiving with her brother and his newly expanded family. She loved Marcus. She adored Lucas. And she was immediately fascinated by Emma. Emma was brilliant, yes. That was obvious to anyone who spent 5 minutes with her. But there was something else, something in her eyes, a depth, a consciousness that seemed far older than 8 years old. There was a wisdom there that shouldn't have existed in a child who had only been given safety and love a year ago. On the last night of her visit, Victoria asked if she could talk to Emma alone. They sat in the library, a room Emma had claimed as her favorite. It was filled with thousands of books, and Emma had been reading through them systematically, absorbing information like a sponge absorbing water. Philosophy, mathematics, physics, history, literature. She read everything with equal intensity. "Emma, I want to ask you something," Victoria said carefully, choosing her words with the precision of someone who worked with traumatized children. "And I want you to think before you answer. Do you remember what happened to you before you found Lucas? Do you remember your life in the trailer?" Emma nodded slowly. "I remember everything." "Tell me about it," Victoria said gently. Emma began to talk. She described the hunger, the relentless, gnawing hunger that never went away, the cold, the fear, the knowledge that nobody was coming to save her, the way she'd learned to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, to anticipate what people wanted from her. The way she'd understood, even at 7 years old, that the world didn't care about children like her, that society had no place for her, that she was disposable. "But then," Emma said, her voice changing, becoming stronger, "Lucas came, and I realized something." "What?" Victoria asked, leaning forward. "That I wasn't meant to just survive," Emma said. "I was meant to do something important. When I found Lucas in the snow, it wasn't an accident. It was like I was supposed to be there, like everything before that moment was leading me to that moment, like my whole life had been preparing me to save someone else. And in saving him, I saved myself." Victoria felt chills run down her spine. In her professional experience, this kind of existential awareness in an 8-year-old was unprecedented. This was the kind of insight that took adults decades of therapy to achieve. "Emma, do you think about the future, about what you want to do when you grow up?" Emma nodded. "I want to help people, like I helped Lucas, but not just one person. I want to help lots of people. I want to make sure that no other children have to be cold and hungry. I want to make sure that nobody gets left behind, nobody gets forgotten, nobody has to survive alone." Victoria looked at this small, composed child with the old soul, and she had a thought that frightened her a little. This girl could change the world. This girl had the potential to do something remarkable. After Victoria left, she called Marcus. "We need to talk about Emma's education," she said. "Mainstream schooling isn't going to be enough for her. She's not just smart, Marcus. She's destined for something extraordinary." Marcus listened as his sister outlined a plan: private tutoring in advanced mathematics, physics, and philosophy, programs at the local university, mentorship from some of the brightest minds in the country, training in leadership and social change. "You're raising a leader," Victoria told him, "maybe even a visionary. Don't waste that potential." Marcus took his sister's advice to heart. Over the next 2 years, Emma's life transformed into something like a masterclass in genius development. She worked with tutors who taught her university-level material. She attended lectures at Vanderbilt University. She began publishing papers on mathematics education in peer-reviewed journals. At age 10, she had already contributed to academic conversations that most adults never participated in. But Marcus made sure that Emma's genius never came at the cost of her childhood. He took her and Lucas on vacations. He attended their school events. He made sure they knew that success and love weren't mutually exclusive. He made sure they understood that intelligence without compassion was empty. One day when Emma was 10 years old, she asked Marcus a question that had clearly been on her mind for some time. "Dad, why did you keep me? You didn't have to. You could have thanked me and sent me back to the system. But you didn't. Why?" Marcus thought about this carefully. He wanted to be honest. He sat down with her, and he took her small hands in his. "Because when I looked at you in that trailer," he said, "I saw something beyond gratitude. I saw a girl who had nothing, and she was willing to risk everything to save a stranger. That kind of character, that kind of goodness, it's rare, Emma, rarer than intelligence, rarer than talent, rarer than anything money can buy. I wanted to nurture it. I wanted to give you every opportunity to become who you're meant to be." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But also because you're my daughter, not because of gratitude or obligation, because I love you, because you belong with us, because the day I met you was one of the best days of my life, because you showed me what really matters. You showed me that all my money, all my success, all my achievements meant nothing compared to the simple act of saving someone's life." Emma was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm glad I found Lucas in the snow." "So am I," Marcus said. "So am I, sweetheart." When Emma was 12 years old, Marcus decided to take both his children on a trip to the Swiss Alps. He rented a private chalet, and for 2 weeks they existed in a bubble of perfect happiness, insulated from the world's demands and expectations. Lucas was 14 now, lanky and athletic, with his father's sharp eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was already showing signs of inheriting his father's business acumen, his strategic mind, his ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. But he had also inherited something from Emma, a fierce dedication to helping others, a commitment to using his intelligence and privilege for good. Emma was brilliant and beautiful, with a calmness that drew people to her. She had grown into a young woman with a quiet confidence, a sense that she knew her place in the world and was determined to fill it with purpose. She was still reading voraciously, still pushing the boundaries of what a 12-year-old was supposed to know. She had started writing papers on social policy, on the economics of poverty, on systems that trapped children in cycles of desperation. One evening, as Marcus watched his children playing in the snow outside the chalet, he was struck by a profound thought that had been growing in his mind for years. Emma and Lucas weren't just siblings in the traditional sense. They were soulmates. They had saved each other. They had changed each other's lives irrevocably. Without Emma finding Lucas that night, Lucas would have died. Without Marcus finding Lucas, Emma would still be living in a freezing trailer, her genius unrecognized, her potential untapped. And without finding both of them, Marcus would have remained a hollow man, successful on paper but empty in his soul, measuring his worth by quarterly earnings instead of by the love he gave and received. That night, after the children were asleep, Marcus sat with a bottle of wine and thought about his life. He was a billionaire. He had everything he'd ever wanted, but the thing he treasured most was the unexpected family that fate had given him. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. "I want to revise my will," he said. "I want to make sure that if anything ever happens to me, Emma is completely protected. I want her to have equal access to everything. The company, the properties, the accounts, everything." "Mr. Webb, are you sure?" his lawyer asked carefully. "Legally speaking, she's your adopted daughter. Most wealthy individuals create a separate trust for adopted children. It's standard practice." "I don't care about most wealthy individuals," Marcus said firmly. "She's my daughter. Equally, that's the way it's going to be. No separate trust, no distinctions. Emma Webb is my daughter, and she deserves to be treated exactly like biological children would be treated. Change the will." The lawyer made the changes. When Marcus woke up the next morning, he realized he'd made the right choice. Emma wasn't just his adopted daughter. She was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. What did it mean to truly matter? What did it mean to create a legacy that wasn't just about money and success, but about love and family? What did it mean to be a human being? That afternoon, Marcus called Emma into his private study. "Sweetheart, I want to tell you something," he said. "Something important." Emma sat down across from him, her intelligent eyes curious. "I've been thinking about something," Marcus continued, "about how our family came together, about the choices we've all made, and I realize that you've always known the truth about where you came from. You remember the trailer, you remember the cold, you remember being alone." Emma nodded. "I do. Sometimes I dream about it, but it doesn't scare me anymore." "I'm glad," Marcus said, "because I want you to know something else. The company, the money, all of it, that's all secondary. What matters is that you're here, that you're my daughter, that I get to watch you become the woman you're meant to be." Marcus stood up and walked to a window that overlooked the Swiss landscape. "I want you to promise me something," he said. "Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter how much money you have or how much power you gain, promise me that you'll never forget where you came from. Promise me that you'll use whatever gifts you have to help people, all people, not just the ones who matter to society, but the ones who don't matter at all, the forgotten ones, the invisible ones, the ones living in trailers in the snow." Emma stood up and hugged her father. "I promise," she whispered. 25 years later, Emma Webb stood in front of a crowd of 5,000 people at the dedication of the Emma Webb Foundation for Homeless Children. She was 37 years old now, wearing a simple black dress, her blonde hair pulled back simply. She had her father's intelligence and her mother's kindness, the kindness she'd inherited not from biology, but from experience, from learning what it meant to save someone else. She had graduated from MIT with degrees in mathematics and social policy. She'd worked at McKinsey for 3 years before deciding that consulting wasn't her calling. She'd spent a year traveling to developing nations, understanding poverty, understanding the systems that trap children in cycles of desperation. She had seen things that broke her heart and strengthened her resolve. Then, at 30, she'd asked her father for her share of her inheritance early. "What are you going to do?" Marcus had asked. "Change the world," Emma had said simply, "or at least change one person at a time." The Emma Webb Foundation now operated in 42 countries. It provided shelter, education, medical care and mentorship to over 100,000 children annually. It had been featured in Time magazine. Emma had been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. She had received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But more importantly, she'd kept her promise. She'd never forgotten. Every decision she made, every dollar she spent, was guided by the memory of a 7-year-old girl in a freezing trailer, wondering if she'd live to see morning. Her father stood in the front row, watching her with tears in his eyes. He was 64 now. Lucas, who worked in venture capital funding social enterprises, was beside him. Emma looked at her family in the audience, and she smiled. "Many of you know my story," Emma began. "You know that I was a homeless child until I was 7 years old. You know that my brother fell into my life frozen and desperate. You know that a man chose love over logic." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "But what you might not know is the name of every child we've saved. Not because they're not important, they're incredibly important, but because their stories are their own. They get to write their own future. They get to decide who they want to become. That's what this foundation gives them. Not charity, but opportunity. Not pity, but dignity. Not a handout, but a hand up." Emma's voice grew stronger, more passionate. "I want to tell you something about poverty. It's not a moral failing. It's not something people deserve. It's not something that builds character. It's a cage. It's a trap. And the children inside that trap don't need inspiration. They need a way out." She gestured to the building behind her. "This building represents a way out. For every child who sleeps here tonight, they're sleeping knowing that tomorrow they'll have breakfast. They'll have someone to talk to. They'll have someone who believes in them. And that makes all the difference." Emma thought about her own journey. From a 7-year-old girl in a freezing trailer to a woman standing in front of thousands, directing a foundation that had changed over 100,000 lives. The trajectory seemed impossible. But it had happened. It had happened because one person chose kindness over fear. One person chose to act instead of looking away. "I was given a second chance," Emma continued, "a chance that most children living in poverty never get. Marcus Webb gave me that chance, not because I deserved it more than anyone else, but because he saw me, really saw me. He recognized that every life has value. Every child has potential. Every person deserves a chance to become who they're meant to be." She looked directly at the camera. "If you're watching this and you see a child who needs help, please don't look away. Please don't tell yourself that it's not your responsibility, because it is. We're all responsible for each other. We're all responsible for making sure that no child has to survive alone in the cold." Emma paused, her eyes glistening with tears. "I want to dedicate this foundation to my father, Marcus Webb, who showed me that love isn't something you feel. It's something you do. It's action. It's sacrifice. It's choosing to help someone even when it costs you something. It's choosing to see the humanity in a stranger and responding with compassion." She turned to look at Marcus in the front row, and their eyes met. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for giving me a family. Thank you for teaching me what it means to truly matter." The crowd erupted. People were crying. Some were standing and applauding. Some were on their knees, moved by the power of her words and the weight of her story. This was more than a dedication ceremony. This was a moment of transformation. This was a moment when people felt the call to be better, to do more, to help those who needed help. After the ceremony, as Emma was being congratulated by dignitaries and foundation board members, Marcus found her. He pulled her into a quiet corner, away from the cameras and the crowds. "I'm so proud of you," he said simply. "Not because of what you've accomplished, but because of who you are. You've become exactly the person I always knew you could be." Emma hugged her father tightly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she said. "Without Lucas. Without the second chance you both gave me." Later that evening, Emma sat alone in her office at the Foundation headquarters. On her desk were photos. One of the trailer where she'd lived, preserved as a memorial, one of Marcus finding Lucas in her arms, one of the day of their adoption, one of her graduation from MIT, one of the Foundation opening, one of her receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the President of the United States. A life documented in photographs, from nothing to everything. She thought about the woman who'd given her life, her biological mother. She'd left, yes, but she'd left Emma with something precious. Instinct, intuition, the understanding that human connection was more valuable than anything else. That love, real love, could transcend circumstances and change lives. Marcus knocked on the doorframe. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. "Hey, Dad," Emma said. "Come sit." Marcus sat down across from her in a chair that had been waiting for him. They sat in silence for a moment, just being together, just existing in this space that they had created together. "I wanted to thank you," Emma said, "for everything, for believing in me, for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself, for choosing me, for loving me." Marcus shook his head. "Emma, you saved my life. You saved Lucas's life. You've saved hundreds of thousands of lives. I didn't give you anything except a home and a name. You did the rest yourself." "That's not true," Emma said. "You gave me something more important than that. You gave me permission to be myself. You gave me the space to become who I was meant to be. You showed me that love is a choice. Every single day you chose to love me, even when I was difficult, even when I had nightmares, even when I didn't believe I was worthy of love. You loved me anyway." Marcus reached across the desk and took his daughter's hand. "Do you remember the day I found you?" he asked. "Every detail," Emma said. "I remember the cold. I remember your face when you saw Lucas. I remember feeling afraid and hopeful at the same time." "I walked into that trailer expecting to find my son," Marcus said. "Instead, I found something I didn't know I needed. A daughter who understood something about love that I'd spent my whole life searching for. You taught me that love isn't transactional. It's not about what you get back. It's about what you give freely." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "You changed my life, Emma. You and Lucas, you made my life mean something, not because of what I could give you, but because you gave me the opportunity to be better, to be more human, to understand what really matters." Emma came around the desk and hugged her father. "We saved each other," she said. "That's what I think happened. We were all lost in different ways, and we found each other in the snow. And somehow, that moment changed everything." The two sat together in that office, overlooking the city where it had all begun. The city of Nashville, the place where a poor girl in a trailer had found a freezing boy in the snow, the place where a billionaire had discovered that the most valuable thing in life wasn't money or success or achievement. It was love. The place where three broken people had found each other and become a family. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Emma something. It was a photograph of the original trailer where she'd lived. He'd had it preserved as a museum piece, a reminder of where she came from, a testament to human resilience. Visitors came from around the world to see it. They stood in that freezing space and tried to imagine what it would have been like. How a 7-year-old girl had survived there. How she'd had the courage to save another child. How one act of kindness had changed the course of history. "You know what I did?" Marcus asked. "What?" Emma said. "I bought the land," Marcus said. "All of it. This foundation is built on the same plot of land where your trailer stood. I wanted to transform that place of desperation into a place of hope. I wanted future generations to know that from darkness, light can emerge, that from poverty, purpose can be found, that from loss, love can bloom." Emma felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't known this. She had thought the foundation was built elsewhere, but of course Marcus would do something like this. He would take the place where she suffered and transform it into a place where thousands of children would find safety and hope. Every time a child comes through those doors, Marcus continued, they're walking on ground that was sanctified by your courage. They're receiving help because you chose to help Lucas that night. They're safe because you were brave enough to act. Emma looked out the window at the building below them, at the children moving through it, at the volunteers working tirelessly to give these children a better future. She thought about the interconnectedness of it all, how one decision on one cold night had rippled through time and space, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. "That's beautiful, Dad," she whispered. "It's true," Marcus said. "That's what makes it beautiful." As Emma and Marcus held each other in that office, the Foundation's night shifted quietly into operation. In the shelter downstairs, children were eating warm meals prepared by volunteers. They were sleeping in clean beds. They were safe. They were loved. Each child had a story. Each child had survived something. Each child had the potential to change the world, just like Emma had. And somewhere in Nashville, on a cold December night, another child would look up at the sky and wonder if anyone would help them. Wonder if they mattered, wonder if there was any point in going on. And because of Emma, because of Marcus, because of the miracle that had started with a small act of kindness all those years ago, the answer would be yes. Yes, someone cares. Yes, you matter. Yes, you deserve to be safe. Yes, your life has value. Love was the most powerful force in the universe, not the romantic kind necessarily, but the fierce, protective, transformative kind. The kind that asked nothing and gave everything. The kind that could save a life. The kind that could change the course of human history. Emma had learned that when she was 7 years old, standing in a freezing trailer, holding another child in her arms. She had learned it through direct experience, through the alchemy of survival and sacrifice. She had learned it not through words or lessons, but through the fundamental knowledge that another person's life mattered more than her own comfort. That was the essence of love. That was the definition of heroism. And she'd spent the rest of her life proving it to the world, proving it through her foundation, proving it through her dedication to children who had been forgotten by society, proving it through her willingness to give away the wealth she had inherited, to use it not for her own comfort, but for the comfort of others, proving it through every decision she made, every hour she worked, every child she helped. The story of Emma Webb was not a fairy tale, though it read like one. It was a true story. A story about what happens when one person chooses to act. A story about the power of kindness. A story about the fact that miracles are real if you're willing to work for them, if you're willing to believe in them, if you're willing to take action. It was a story about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It was a story about the resilience of the human spirit. It was a story about what it means to love someone so much that you would sacrifice your own safety, your own comfort, your own future for them. And perhaps, in reading this story, you will understand something fundamental about yourself. You will understand that you too have the power to change someone's life. You too can be a miracle for someone else. You too can choose love. You too can choose to act instead of looking away. You too can be the person who saves someone else's life. You have more power than you realize. You have more capacity for compassion than you've ever accessed. You have the ability to transform someone's entire world with a single act of kindness. Think about the moments in your life when someone showed you mercy. Think about the people who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Think about the times when a simple act of kindness changed the trajectory of your entire existence. Those moments matter. Those people matter. They shaped who you are today. Now imagine being that person for someone else. Imagine being the Marcus Webb in someone else's story. Imagine being the one who sees the potential in someone the world has discarded. Imagine being the one who chooses love when fear would be easier. Because that is the most important message of Emma's story. It could have been anyone. It could have been you. The power to change lives is not reserved for billionaires or celebrities or powerful people. It's available to anyone with a heart willing to act, to anyone with the courage to help, to anyone with the love to save another person from the darkness. That is the legacy of Emma Webb, not her foundation or her wealth or her accomplishments, but the simple knowledge that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. If you're struggling, if you're in darkness, if you feel invisible or worthless or forgotten, I want you to know that you matter. You are not disposable. Your life has value, and there is someone out there who would choose you, who would see your potential even when you can't see it yourself, who would love you not because you deserve it, but because love isn't something you have to earn. Love is something someone gives you freely, expecting nothing in return. If you know someone who needs help, please help them. Don't look away. Don't tell yourself it's not your responsibility. Be brave, be kind, be the miracle in someone else's story.